Several decades ago, a modern-day Robin Hood was convicted of embezzlement from a local savings and loan. Minnie Magnum stole $2.9 million from the Commonwealth Building and Loan Association between the years 1933 and 1955. In today's dollars, that would be more than $37 million. Minnie was generous with the pilfered proceeds of her crime. She lavishly donated to charitable causes in her community, causing her to receive accolades for her great philanthropy. But her outward appearance of altruism was deceptive. When the dishonesty of her deeds was fully disclosed, she was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Jesus cautioned about people using false piety to impress others while secretly sinning. He chastised the Pharisees who spoke with authority about Scripture but failed to abide by it themselves. Jesus admonished, "Everything they do is done for people to see." That's Matthew 23:5. He called out their hypocrisy and asserted that those who exalt themselves will be humbled and those who humble themselves will be exalted, Matthew 23:12. Jesus likened many of the religious leaders of the day to whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, but on the inside full of bones of the dead and everything unclean, Matthew 23:27. Their appearance of righteousness was fake. They actually were filled with hypocrisy and wickedness. Has the church today become susceptible to the same criticism? Do we squawk about the awful condition of our culture while sitting on our hands, refusing to engage in the daily political activities that determine our social environment? Do we disparage politicians but refuse to organize Christians to engage in the earthly institutions that in fact drive the world in which we live? Are we guilty of living Minnie Magnum morality that provides a false appearance of concern for the community, yet empowers Satan because we refuse to get involved? I am appalled that there are churches today that teach the commandment, "Thou shalt not murder," from Exodus 20, verse 13, yet support the massacre of children in the womb. Equally surprising are those churches who give lip service to scriptures defining marriage while refusing to encourage voters to align actions with Scripture. Treating God's biblical standards as window dressing to keep the church looking pure and clean while refusing to engage in the legislative process where the laws and social standards are actually set is as hypocritical as the religious leaders who were criticized by Jesus. While working with the Virginia Family Foundation and Turning Point USA Faith, I've witnessed church hypocrisy. Many local churches refuse to allow their congregants to be informed of bipartisan survey results that reveal candidate positions on pending issues of biblical dimensions, such as abortion, the definition of marriage, gender confusion. And Turning Point USA Faith, which is a nonpartisan, scripture-based faith organization, has been turned away from a number of churches. Those churches maintain a whitewashed outward appearance of purity while supporting Satan's culture of death and destruction by refusing to get involved. To be sure, there are churches who willingly step out of their comfort zone in order to be salt and light in a troubled world, a world that desperately needs God's influence. For them, I am grateful. Being a believer requires boldness. As Joshua led the Hebrew nation into the promised land, he instructed the people to be strong and very courageous, as Joshua 1:7. Joshua knew that maintaining a godly culture would require people to be fully engaged against the wiles of Satan. God is with us, and he expects us to boldly take a stance for his kingdom. In fact, the list of those who will burn eternally after the final judgment begins with the cowardly and the unbelieving. That's Revelation 21:8. Those who avoid engagement in the political issues of the day may think they are showing neutrality and tolerance, but in fact they are taking the easy, broad gate that leads to judgment and destruction. See Matthew 7:13 and 14. So as we consider whether believers should engage in the political issues of the day, reflect on these questions for introspection, if you will. Question number 1, what issues are currently pending in the legislature that involve biblical principles? Question number 2, how are you influencing the legislators who represent you in the democratic republic form of government that God has provided for us? And question 3, how is your church informing and preparing its congregants to be salt and light that affects the course of culture? Hundreds of laws are passed every year by politicians representing us in the state legislatures and in the halls of Congress. Keeping abreast of the issues being voted on by our representatives requires more time than most of us have. Fortunately, there are reliable Christian organizations that systematically track the issues and publish reports on matters that involve biblical principles. God has provided us with a democratic republic form of government. Consider Romans 13:1. Such a form of government requires an informed electorate so that godly representatives are elected to vote on laws and social matters each year. Christian due diligence is thwarted when churches block the dissemination of information about actions pending in their legislative bodies or shelter the people from the political process by which the decisions are made in government. Too often, churches shun the political process that God has provided for our legislative decision-making, and as a result, Satan is given the upper hand in directing society away from godly living. In Virginia, for example, that has manifested in laws promoting abortion, gender mutilation of children, removing the biblical definition of marriage from Virginia's Constitution, and so forth. If we are serious about making disciples who follow Jesus, heed the scriptures, and direct people to the narrow gate of godly living, then we must boldly promote informing our congregations of pending legislation that bears on biblical issues. And we must encourage believers to take an active role in government and politics. Opting for a hands-off approach leads to mini magnum morality. The church may appear pure on the outside because it avoids politics that controls government, but in truth, churches that repel information about issues of government and politics are harboring the enemy. Without an informed and involved church, Satan lurks in the halls of the legislature, unimpeded in selling his lies and distorting standards for moral social conduct. It's time for churches to participate in the process of governance by engaging in the form of government that God has established for our country. We have a Christian duty to exercise due diligence and take informed positions on legislative matters. God did not provide us with a form of government that is by the people and for the people, with the expectation that Christians would sit on the sidelines.